Have you ever noticed how, when we start trying to heal our emotions, we almost always look outside ourselves? We go to therapists, we take courses, we read books. We fill our homes with crystals and affirmations. We write journals, we make promises. We search for techniques, tools, rituals, and explanations. Now, it's not that any of these things are wrong. Quite the opposite, actually. Many of them can really help. They can open doors for us, they can bring clarity, and they can certainly accompany us on the journey. But there is something deeper, something rarely said with the honesty it deserves. No matter how much we do, no matter how hard we try, there is always a moment when we feel like something is still missing. It's like we're touching the edge of the wound without truly stepping into it, as if healing has become just another form of escape, another disguise, another attempt to keep control. Because looking directly at the pain requires something beyond knowledge. It requires surrender. And I don't mean surrendering to life. I mean surrendering to what you carry inside you. This surrender, it might be one of the bravest things a human being can do. No one prepares us for that kind of meeting. No one teaches us how to truly sit with what hurts without immediately trying to fix it. No one tells us that healing is not linear. It's not clean. It's not comfortable. It doesn't come with soft background music or warm lighting. Often it looks more like sleepless nights, like crises that we don't even know how to name, like heavy silences, like an internal confusion that makes us feel like we are completely losing control, when, in reality, what is crumbling is just the illusion of having control in the first place. And right there, without us even realizing it, is where the real road home begins. Because healing isn't about eliminating the pain, it's about learning to listen to it. It's not about suppressing what we feel, it's about allowing it to exist. Deep inside us, there lives a part that we often hide, even from our own conscious mind. This is the part that learned to survive by adapting, the one who smiles when everything is falling apart. The one who says, "I'm fine," while trembling on the inside. This is the part that swallows the rage, the exhaustion, the tears. Because somewhere along the way, it learned that feeling was dangerous, that showing yourself was a mistake, that vulnerability was just a synonym for weakness. That part didn't get sick yesterday. It has been silently screaming for years, maybe decades. And that scream transforms into symptoms: anxiety, insomnia, apathy, emotional fatigue, a vague, lingering sadness. What is happening right now isn't some meaningless chemical imbalance. It is your soul trying desperately to wake you up, because somewhere along the line, you lost yourself. Carl Jung said it so clearly: what you resist persists, but what you embrace transforms. And what does embracing truly mean? It means stopping the constant running, stopping filling your calendar with endless commitments just so you don't have to feel anything. It means stopping the search for external answers that only distract you from the internal ones. It means sitting down with that pain and asking it tenderly, "What are you trying to tell me?" It means making space for sadness, for fear, for rage, without needing to understand everything right away. Don't rush to find the meaning, because often what pain truly needs isn't analysis, it's just to be heard. Healing starts when we dare to listen, but listening hurts, because listening forces us to look at our choices. It demands that we question relationships that support us, but also drain our light. It requires dismantling the survival stories we invented, stories where we became strong, but only at the cost of disconnecting from who we really are. Listening might mean realizing that the life we're living isn't the one we truly desire, that the roles we play are pulling us away from the truth, that the masks we wear are actually suffocating us. Of course, that's scary, but it is also the beginning of a quiet revolution. Because when you truly dare to listen, something begins to shift. You realize maybe you aren't healing to return to who you were before. You are healing to finally allow yourself to be who you always were. From there, you understand something fundamental. Healing isn't an event, it's a coexistence with your truth. It's a continuous process, sometimes slow, sometimes confusing, an ebb and flow, a cycle, a dance between what emerges and what dissolves. There will be days when you feel strong, bright, and at peace, and others when it feels like you've fallen back, relapsed, or lost everything. And all of that is okay, because healing isn't about stopping the pain. It's about learning not to abandon yourself when the pain returns. It means knowing how to stay, to remain, not to run away, not to betray yourself anymore. Real healing doesn't make you invulnerable, it makes you whole. And being whole isn't about always being fine. It's accepting that there are still parts of you that bleed, that tremble, that doubt. It's stopping the demand for emotional perfection and starting to simply offer yourself presence. And when you offer yourself presence, when you hold yourself, something begins to heal. Not because of magic, but because of truth. Because the part of you that became ill from abandonment finally starts to feel seen. And that gesture, however subtle it might seem, is profoundly curative. Because you are telling your own soul, I am here. I am not leaving. Maybe what you need today isn't another technique. It isn't another method. It isn't another promise. Maybe what you need is silence. Truly listen. Because only you know what you feel. Only you know your story. Only you can embrace your life with the compassion that no one else can give you. And that is why healing is inside you. Because it is in you where the wound lives. It is in you where the truth resides. It is in you where, even if it is sleeping, the strength to find yourself again is beating. One of the first lies we were told about emotional healing is that it exists outside of us. That there is someone wiser, more enlightened, or more prepared who has the perfect answer. That some revolutionary technique exists, some infallible protocol, some magical practice capable of dissolving all the pain we've accumulated. And we believe it because we are exhausted. Because we desperately want relief. Because the idea that someone or something can rescue us from the abyss sounds profoundly comforting. We start running, hopping from therapy to therapy, book to book, course to course. We're chasing the hope that somewhere, in some hidden corner of the world, there's the definitive answer. The one thing that will finally bring us peace when we find it. And look, there is nothing wrong with searching. There's no mistake in wanting help. But sooner or later, a quiet discomfort appears, a void that won't fill up. This fuzzy feeling that we are still somehow incomplete. Because no matter how many tools we collect, if we don't actually find ourselves in the process, something essential just slips away. And then we wonder, did I not find the right method yet? But the real question should be, am I finding myself, or am I just trying to fix myself up so I can fit better into a world that never saw me as complete in the first place? Healing isn't about becoming perfect. It's not about turning into some ideal version of yourself. It's not about reaching some flawless emotional state just to prove that you're okay. True healing doesn't serve performance. It doesn't serve image. It doesn't serve external approval. It is actually a process of unlearning, of dismantling things, of taking off all those layers that were imposed on us. Healing truly begins when we stop trying to be what others expect and start with compassion to look at who we really are. And that hurts. Because healing isn't about covering up what's wounded with bright light. It's not about softening the darkness to make it more acceptable. Healing is stripping down. It's letting the armor fall away. It's letting go of the characters we play. And that doesn't sell well, because the self-help market often promises peace, promised fullness, abundance. It tells you that if you just follow the 5 right steps, you'll stop suffering. It invites you onto a fast, bright path, perfectly edited for social media. But what it never tells you is that there are no shortcuts for the soul. And that creates a cruel cycle. You search for help, you find momentary relief, then the pain returns. You feel guilty for not being completely healed. You feel like you aren't evolving fast enough. So you go looking for another technique, another retreat, another workshop, and you repeat the pattern. It becomes a spirituality of performance, where you have to prove that you're healing, that you're improving, that you're vibrating high, even though you might still be bleeding on the inside. This relentless search for a perfect cure hides a deep, fundamental fear, the fear of looking directly at the pain. Because looking at pain demands silence. It demands presence. It demands the simple courage to feel everything that has been repressed for years. No technique can do that for you. No guide can walk that part of the journey in your place. Sitting down across from your shadow and listening to it, that is a task you cannot transfer to anyone else. That is the blind spot of most modern healing processes. They want to illuminate the shadow without ever letting the shadow speak. But the shadow always speaks. It speaks in the relapses. It speaks in the anger you don't understand, in the sadness that seems causeless, in the shame that just appears suddenly, in the fatigue that never goes away,
in the relationships that keep repeating.
It speaks in your body, in your skin, in your very breath. And every time you rush into a new technique without listening to what that inner voice is saying, you reinforce that abandonment. You tell your soul, once again, that it is not enough as it is, that it needs to be fixed, that it cannot feel what it feels. True healing, on the other hand, begins at the exact moment you stop trying to heal just to please others. It's when you finally understand that the goal isn't to eliminate suffering, but to learn how to live with it in a way that is more honest and far more human. Be gentler. Deep down, pain doesn't transform through fighting. It transforms through embracing it. Not when you deny it, not when you correct it. It transforms when you recognize it. When you finally stop asking, "How do I get rid of this?" and start asking instead, "What is this wound trying to show me?" That is the profound shift. And listen, nobody can do this for you. You can have support. You can have someone listening. But the key moment always happens alone, in the deep silence of the early morning, when you are just there with yourself. No filters, no masks, no distractions. And right there, something begins to move, not through force, but through surrender, not through control, but through letting go. True emotional healing isn't really about doing much. It's about being present, being honest, being vulnerable, being whole, even when you feel like you are completely broken into pieces. And that kind of being isn't something you learn in a class. You discover it, little by little, in the spaces between all the expectations, in the moments when you simply allow yourself to fail, to feel, to fall. Because it's right there, precisely there, where you finally stop trying to fit in, and you begin, finally, to find yourself. When you stop running from the pain, something within you starts to wake up. It doesn't happen right away. There are no fireworks, no absolute certainties. Sometimes it's just a slightly longer pause between one thought and the next, a sigh you didn't know you needed, a vague feeling of simple relief, as if something deep inside you is finally allowed to breathe. Even though it still hurts, even though the confusion hasn't gone away, even though you still don't fully understand what is happening, you feel that something tiny, something profoundly real, has shifted. This change isn't the result of some new technique. It's not the product of a catchy mantra or an inspiring book. It is the result of one silent gesture, the gesture of staying with yourself, of not betraying yourself this time, of resisting the temptation to put on the mask again just to keep functioning. Because that's what you did for so long. You weren't truly functioning, you were just complying. You gave what was expected. You were everything you thought you had to be, except yourself. Now, slowly, you realize you don't have to keep running to be safe. You don't have to fit in to be valuable. You don't need to hide your sensitivity, your sadness, or your deepest questions just so people will love you. Because if love only arrives when you leave parts of yourself outside, that's not love. That is just a silent agreement. Then you begin to allow yourself something truly radical, to feel without the anesthesia. Not all the time, not every single day, sometimes just for a few minutes. But you don't suppress it like you used to. You don't ignore it so quickly. You don't disconnect from yourself with that familiar ease anymore. And that, even though it seems like nothing, is monumental. Because the part of you that was sleeping, the one that cried in secret, the one that didn't feel seen, the one that didn't know how to speak, that part starts to understand that it can finally come out. It has space now. It won't be shoved back into the deepest part of your emotional closet. And that heals it. Sometimes healing is nothing more than this, just letting out what you kept hidden for so long. The anger, the sadness, the fear, the disappointment, the tenderness you never showed, the tears you never shed, the words you swallowed, the times you said yes when your entire body was screaming no. Healing is allowing yourself to finally say, I don't want to pretend this doesn't hurt anymore. It's stopping the need to justify the people who wounded you. It's letting go of the constant duty to understand every single thing that happened, and just starting to feel it. To live the grief, to honor the wound without having to explain it. Because you don't need a perfect, tidy story to deserve compassion. You don't need to prove that you've overcome everything to be worthy of love. You really don't need to be completely okay, just to belong. Just be you, fully, with everything that comes with it. And then, the changes won't just be internal. The world outside starts rearranging itself too. Relationships you once tolerated? They become heavy now. Conversations you accepted out of habit? They start feeling uncomfortable. Places that once supported you, now they feel suffocating. Why? Because you're feeling again. You're finding your center. And your soul simply won't accept crumbs anymore. Not in relationships, not in truth. This might hurt. It might confuse you. It might even make you afraid to feel like your world, as you knew it, is falling apart. But this collapse, it's necessary. You aren't losing your world. You're letting go of what was built without you, what was built from your silence, what was held together while you slowly faded away. And now, you are coming back. Returning to yourself isn't just an act of bravery. It's an act of profound love, the kind that doesn't make much noise but changes absolutely everything. Because when you return to you recover something no trauma, no history, no wound could ever destroy. Your ability to be home for yourself. And that is truly priceless. Healing is also remembering. Not remembering like mentally reviewing a fact, but remembering like gathering up pieces of yourself that you left behind on the journey. For years, maybe since you were very young, your soul kept leaving pieces of you scattered everywhere. Sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of necessity, sometimes even out of love. You had to survive. You had to please others. You had to adapt. And so, you kept leaving bits of yourself in places where they couldn't possibly bloom, in relationships that dimmed your light, in environments that didn't truly see you, in decisions that weren't ever truly yours. And you did this with the best intentions, because no one chooses to get lost on purpose. You lose yourself like someone sacrificing silently, believing it's the only way to keep moving forward. But eventually, something inside you starts to feel heavy. Something feels hollow. It's like you're living a life that doesn't fully belong to you, as if you are just a spectator watching your own story unfold. Then the moment arrives, sometimes slowly, sometimes suddenly. The moment when you just can't continue the same way, when something deep inside finally says, "Enough." It's not a scream, it's a whisper. But that whisper changes everything, because once you hear it, you can't pretend you didn't. You simply cannot go back now. Even if you don't know where to start, you know one thing. You can't keep betraying yourself. That is where the reunion begins. The reunion with what was forgotten, with the child you once were, with the lonely teenager who cried by themselves, with all the times you swallowed your pain just to avoid bothering someone, with the dreams you postponed, with the emotions you buried alive just to keep walking. This reunion isn't a trip down memory lane or some kind of nostalgia.
It is an act of dignity. It means returning for yourself, taking back what is truly yours, reaching out and shaking hands with the part of you that you once had to reject, just so you could be loved by others. And that realization, it never feels pretty. Sometimes it hurts far more than any external abandonment, because you suddenly realize you were the one who left yourself alone. You were the one who denied yourself. You were the one who, out of love for others, forgot who you were. But this realization is also the beginning of an immense truth. If you were the one who left, you are the one who can return. If you silenced yourself, you are the one who can speak. If you walked away, you are the one who can come back. This reunion, it doesn't happen all at once. It's not a single event. It is a process made of many layers. Sometimes you find this part of you in a casual conversation, sometimes in a scent that stirs up an old memory, maybe in a piece of music, a single phrase, a dream, or just a tear that falls without warning. And there it is, a part of you that was asleep. It returns to you, and you gently receive it. Each of these small returns, no matter how tiny they seem, they are portals. They are sacred. They are like tiny lights flickering on across the map of your soul. They guide you. They show you that you aren't broken. You were only fragmented. And now, you are finally starting to gather your pieces, not to become who you were before, but to become the person you always were, before the forgetting began. And in that quiet process, something beautiful begins to bloom. Self-trust. Not a trust based on accomplishments, or appearance, or external recognition, but a trust that is deep, serene, silent. A trust that whispers, "I can be with myself, even when everything is burning down." It says, "I don't need to understand everything right now. I just need to stop abandoning myself." Because in the end, that is what truly hurt us the most, having left ourselves. Not having anyone stay when we needed them most, and not knowing how to stay with ourselves. But now you are learning. You are returning. You are listening. And when that happens, the healing has already begun. It doesn't matter how much is left to do. It doesn't matter if it still hurts sometimes. The important thing is that this time, you are with you. There is a moment on the path of healing that often goes unmentioned. A delicate, invisible, intimate instant. It's when you can no longer keep going the way you were, but you also don't know how to go on differently. When you have stepped away from the old pain, but the sense of relief hasn't arrived yet. When you have left behind the patterns that hurt you, but you don't yet know how to build something new. That moment feels like an emptiness, like you are suspended in midair, without ground, without direction,
without certainty. And everything inside of you wants to run away. It wants to return to what is familiar, even if it hurts. It wants to go back to autopilot, even if it dims your light. It wants to find anything to cover up the silence. Because silence, when we aren't used to it, it is frightening. It confronts us. It shows us what we have been avoiding. But if you can manage to stay there, if you decide, for the very first time, not to run, something begins to change. Staying put is a profoundly revolutionary act, not because it is heroic, but because it is rare. Because almost no one taught us how to remain with what hurts, to hold the emptiness without rushing to fill it, to look at the fear without trying to destroy it, to simply allow ourselves to be without doing anything. We are so conditioned to solve, to understand, to rush forward, that we forget that the soul does not work on a schedule, that there are pains that don't want to be explained, they just want to be embraced, that there are emotions that don't need a solution,
They only need space. And that space? Only your presence can offer it. When you choose to stay with yourself, even right in the middle of the chaos, you are actually reversing years of internal abandonment. You are telling your wound, I don't have all the answers, but I am here. And that, even if it seems like very little, is everything. Because the deepest wound many of us carry isn't the pain itself, it's having had to carry it alone. It's the feeling that there was no safe place to break down, to cry, to fall apart, or just simply not to know. So when you choose to stay today, even if you tremble, even if it hurts, even if you don't understand, you are building that place inside of you, just for you. A place where you don't have to pretend, where you don't need to prove a thing, where you are not a corrected version of yourself, but exactly who you are, just as you are now. And it is in this exact place that the real alchemy begins, because there is no transformation without presence. There is no integration without permanence. You cannot heal a wound that you reject. You can't embrace a part of yourself that you refuse to look at. But if you stay, if you breathe with it, if you stop trying to push it away, it begins to soften. It opens up. It starts telling its story. And there, in that silent narrative, you discover something no one ever told you. Your pain makes sense. Not because it's fair, not because you deserved it, but because it holds a truth, a call, a message that got trapped in the middle of all the noise. Maybe what your sadness was trying to tell you was that you were living a life you didn't choose. Maybe your anger was the voice of a part of you that was never defended. Maybe your anxiety was a desperate warning cry from a soul that couldn't handle being on autopilot anymore. Maybe your fear was a sacred warning. Do not abandon yourself again. And when you listen to that, something inside you begins to quiet down. Not everything, not all at once, but enough to keep going. Enough to take the next step without running. Enough to trust, even if only for an instant, that this path, no matter how confusing it seems, is leading you back. Back to what, you might ask? Back to yourself. To who you were before the noise, before the duty, before the masks. Back to the pulse of your soul, to your most intimate truth. To that place inside you that never truly broke, it just hid. And if you can just stay there, even for 1 minute, you are already healing. We talk a lot about the fear of failure, that paralysis that stops us from moving because we're afraid of messing up, of being judged, of not measuring up. But there is another fear, a quieter, deeper, more hidden fear that almost no one talks about. The fear of shining. Yes, the fear of shining. The fear of taking up your own space, of showing who you really are, of living with the intensity that your soul truly yearns for. Because when you've spent so long dimming yourself down just to be accepted, when you got used to shrinking so you wouldn't bother anyone,
When your history taught you that being yourself had consequences, then the light starts to scare you too. Shining after being wounded can feel like exposure, like becoming completely vulnerable, like opening a door you closed for protection. And why? Because your light, your authenticity, your living presence doesn't come from perfection. It comes from the scar, from what survived, from what learned how to speak after so much silence. And that is frightening, because deep down, you know that if you truly show up, some things will change. Some people will walk away. Some relationships will stop working. Some connections will simply break. Why? Because you won't betray yourself anymore just to keep them going. And then, the sacred question arrives. Am I willing to lose what was never truly mine just to find what is? That is one of the most powerful thresholds in healing. It means stopping the fear of your own expansion. It's not that you fear growth itself. You fear growing and being left alone. You fear being totally yourself and not being loved for it. You worry that by using your voice, by looking up, by setting boundaries, you'll lose everything you thought you needed. But the secret they didn't tell you? Everything you lose when you truly become yourself was never truly yours anyway. You only held on to it to avoid feeling the emptiness. You accepted it just to avoid facing the silence of solitude. You tolerated it just to keep belonging, even if it cost you your soul. And then a day comes. Sometimes it happens during a crisis. Sometimes it happens in total silence. You decide it's just not worth it anymore. You choose to be you, even if that means walking alone for a while. You choose to make someone uncomfortable rather than disappearing into invisibility again. You prefer the trembling vulnerability of authenticity over the numbness of repetition. And on that day, something inside is freed. Not with a bang, not with euphoria, but with a quiet truth. You begin to feel that even though the fear is still there is also desire. A desire to speak with your own voice, to move at your own pace, to choose from your deepest center, to look at your reflection and finally recognize yourself without guilt. That desire is sacred because it doesn't come from the ego. It comes from the soul finally moving back into its rightful space. And then, slowly, you begin to shine. Not like a performance, not for applause, but like an internal fire that simply refuses to go out. A fire that whispers to you, don't hide who you are anymore. Don't fake what you don't feel. Don't shrink yourself just to fit into small spaces. It might still hurt. There might still be moments of doubt. But there is one thing that is no longer negotiable: your truth. And that, right there, is the beginning of all freedom. There is something deeply healing about being seen without judgment, about being looked at with eyes that don't evaluate you, that don't try to fix you, that don't rush you. Eyes that simply hold space, that are just there. They don't need to understand everything in order to stay. This kind of presence is a rare medicine. Rare because hardly anyone received it in their childhood. Rare because we live in a culture of quick answers, immediate corrections, and urgent solutions. But the soul doesn't heal with urgency. The soul heals with presence. And that presence doesn't have to come from someone else. Sure, when it comes from another person, a friend, a therapist, someone who truly loves you, it is incredibly valuable. It is restorative. But the most healing presence of all is the one you can offer yourself. The one that says, I am here. I am not leaving. Even if you are broken, even if you are confused, even if you have no idea where to go next, I am staying right here with you. Because often, the worst pain isn't the pain itself. It's having felt it alone. It's realizing you grew up believing there was no space for your tears. We learned that sadness was annoying, that fear was a weakness, that anger was ugly. And so we started storing it all away. We silenced it. until we stopped hearing ourselves completely. But when you start being with yourself, without judgment, without rushing, without demands, something inside you begins to reorganize itself. It's as if your body finally sighs, "At last." As if your soul whispers, "Thank you." The wound, finally heard, begins to relax, not because it vanished, but because it was recognized. Presence isn't passive. It is profoundly active. It doesn't do much, but it holds you. It doesn't solve things, but it embraces you. It doesn't push you, but it walks alongside you. And in the emotional world, that is everything. Because often we don't need someone to tell us what to do. We just need someone to be there. Someone to withstand the silence with us, the fall, the uncertainty. Someone who won't run away when we are struggling. And if no one did that for you in the past, today, you can do it for yourself. Not as an act of compensation, but as a declaration of love. Because yes, staying with yourself when everything hurts is an act of radical love. It's telling your wound, "I'm not afraid of you. You can show yourself. You can exist. I won't hide you anymore." And that changes the bond you have with yourself. You start trusting yourself because you no longer abandon yourself at the first symptom. You don't shut down at the first sign of conflict. You no longer betray yourself just to be accepted. You learn to stay, to listen to yourself, to simply breathe with yourself. And when that happens, everything starts to shift. Not externally, not immediately, but internally. In the invisible places, in what holds you up. Because when you stay with yourself, life also begins to stay with you. It responds to you. It speaks to you in symbols. It reveals paths you couldn't see before. Presence opens doors that fear had closed. And every time you choose not to run, even when it hurts, you are saying, "I deserve to be held, even if it's just by me." For a long time, we were taught to view the body as a machine, a collection of organs, muscles, systems, something that could work or fail, something to be molded, controlled, and corrected. But what no one ever told us, at least not truly enough, is that the body is not just flesh. It is history. It is memory. It is a language. It is the guardian of everything the soul couldn't speak out loud. The body doesn't forget. It stores every repressed emotion, every silent word, every fear you couldn't name, every boundary you didn't dare set, every time you pretended to be fine while breaking inside. And it doesn't hold it as a punishment. It holds it as a witness, as if saying, "If you can't hold this right now, I will keep it for you until you are ready to look at it." That's why, when you start the path of emotional healing, the body often begins to speak, sometimes with symptoms that have no medical explanation. Vague aches, knots in the stomach, tightness in the chest, insomnia, constant fatigue, or just a diffuse feeling of discomfort, as if something deep inside is finally asking for attention. And this is where conflict usually begins, because we want to heal emotionally, but we keep treating the body as if it has no voice, as if it weren't part of the process, as if it wasn't, in fact, the altar where everything takes place. But when you finally start listening to it, when, instead of fighting the symptoms, you decide to ask yourself what they mean, another doorway opens. A deep one, an ancient one that connects to layers of yourself you didn't even know were waiting to be seen. Sometimes the pain in your back is the weight of years spent holding on to things that were never meant for you to carry. Sometimes that lump in your throat, that's everything you never said because you were afraid of losing love. Sometimes the tightness in your chest is the sadness you never cried out. And sometimes the insomnia is the anxiety of a part of you that just doesn't want to live on autopilot anymore. When you finally give it space, the body responds. It softens. It calms down. Not because the pain vanishes right away, but because it's finally being heard. It doesn't have to scream so loudly to be acknowledged. Emotional healing is also learning to inhabit your body again, not just as a vehicle, but as a temple, as a sacred dwelling, as an ally, as an extension of your very soul. When you disconnect from your body, you disconnect from yourself. But when you return to it, you return to your story. And finally, you can begin to rewrite it, with more tenderness, with more patience, and with more truth. The body doesn't lie. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't interpret.
It only shows. It only expresses. It only reveals. If you learn to listen to it, without judging, without forcing, without demanding perfection, you will discover that your body isn't working against you. Quite the opposite. It has been trying to save you all this time. Carl Jung said it with piercing clarity. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And in that brave, silent, radical gesture begins one of the deepest parts of the healing process, the encounter with the shadow. The shadow isn't evil. It's not something to be surgically removed, corrected, or defeated. The shadow is everything we couldn't be, everything we hid away just to be loved, everything we judged within ourselves because we were taught it was unacceptable. The rage you learned to disguise, the sadness you denied so you wouldn't bother anyone, the urge to scream when you were only allowed to smile, the exhaustion you hid to appear strong, the wounds you didn't show for fear of rejection. All of that is the shadow, and most of us spend our lives denying it, projecting it, disguising it as virtue, covering it up with superficial spirituality, with fast food self-help, with pretty phrases that don't touch the deep core. But the shadow doesn't give up. It doesn't silence itself. It just waits. It waits for the moment when you finally dare to look at it without judgment, to sit with it, like sitting with a forgotten part of yourself. Not to correct it, but to know it, to understand its origin, to embrace its pain. Because yes, the shadow hurts, but not because of what it is. It hurts because of everything it carried alone. When you dare to look at your shadow, you discover that many of the things that bother you the most about yourself aren't flaws. They are wounds. Impatience may be a mask for abandonment. Coldness might have been born from a fear of trusting. The need for control could have emerged amidst pure chaos. Judgment might just be a way to defend yourself against shame. And then, you stop judging yourself so harshly. Not because you deny responsibility, but because you begin to understand your story. You connect the invisible threads between what you lived through and how you learned to defend yourself. You recognize that every part of you that is hard to accept today was, at one point, a strategy for survival. This doesn't justify everything, but it explains. And when it explains, it softens. And when it softens, it allows. And when it allows, it heals. Healing is not eliminating the shadow. It is integrating it. It is making space for it. It is telling it, you don't have to hide anymore. You can be part of me. I give you a place. And when that happens, something changes. Not outside, not immediately, but deeply inside. You stop living defensively. You stop being so afraid of making mistakes. You stop needing to be perfect because you no longer need the world to approve of an edited version of you. It's enough just to be who you are, with all that implies. And there, in that deep, silent, almost invisible acceptance, the real light begins to be born. Not a dazzling light, not a light that denies, but a light that holds, that embraces, that illuminates without erasing the darkness. A light that is truly yours. Healing isn't just remembering. It's not only looking at the past, reliving the wounds, or understanding their roots. Deep down, healing is also about unlearning. Unlearning everything you thought you had to be. Unlearning everything they taught you was absolute truth. Everything you internalized without question, just so you could keep belonging. Because yes, often the pain doesn't come from what we lived through, but from what we had to believe
in order to survive it. Beliefs that seemed to protect you, but slowly pulled you away from yourself. Ideas like, I'm not enough. I don't have the right to ask. If I show my sadness,
They will leave me. I have to earn love. Showing what I truly feel is dangerous. All those phrases aren't just passing thoughts. They are internal structures. They are the maps you learned to navigate life with. Invisible rules that dictated every choice, every sacrifice, every connection. But a moment comes when those rules no longer serve you. They don't protect you anymore. They imprison you. And that's when the most silent and radical process of all begins. Unlearning. Unlearning isn't forgetting. It's looking again. It's questioning with love. It's asking yourself, is this thing I've always believed still true for me? It's giving yourself permission to let go of inherited truths, family mandates, and unconscious loyalties. It means stopping the habit of saying things like, I've always been this way, and starting to say, I can choose again. Unlearning means stopping the demand for strength all the time, stopping the thought that asking for help is failure, stopping the belief that your worth depends on what you do. It means allowing yourself to just be, without having to prove anything. It is disassembling the layers of conditioning, one by one, like taking off old armor that you no longer need just to keep walking. And yes, it's scary. Without that armor, you feel exposed. You feel more fragile, more vulnerable. But you also feel more you. Because underneath everything you learn to do is who you really are. And reconnecting with that is priceless. Because right there, in that core, in that essence that cannot be explained but can absolutely be felt, that is where your real strength lies. Not a strength of iron, not a fake toughness, but a soft strength. Like the roots we never see, yet they hold everything up. It's a strength born from authenticity, from coherence, from the tenderness in how you speak to yourself. It's the peace that settles when you finally stop needing to perform all the time. From that space, you can truly begin again, not like starting from zero, but like returning to yourself. Not erasing everything that happened, but honoring what you lived through. And then choosing what you want to carry forward and what you're ready to leave behind. Because that, too, is a way to heal. Choosing what resonates. Choosing what truly vibrates with you. Choosing what brings you closer to your center. Choosing the things that make you feel like you aren't betraying yourself. This kind of choice? It's an act of love. Love for your present. Love for your history. Love for your very soul. One of the most painful mistakes we make in this journey of healing is comparison. We compare our wounds to someone else's, our timeline to theirs. We look at our progress next to someone who, from the outside, seems more advanced, more stable, more solved. That comparison isn't just unfair, it's actually quite violent. Every soul has its own timing. Every wound has its own rhythm. Every awakening happens in a unique way. There are no universal clocks to measure something that can only be felt deep inside. But we live in a culture that worships speed, that values visible results. It rewards the person who has gotten over everything, who appears resilient, strong, and totally functional. And so, when the pain returns, as it often does, we think we are failing. We feel like we've regressed, that we didn't do enough. We start saying harsh things to ourselves. We punish ourselves in silence. We ask, why does it still hurt? Why hasn't it completely left? Why, after doing so much work, does the fear, the tears, the sadness, the doubt still surface? But maybe the question isn't, why am I still feeling this? Maybe the question is, which part of me needs more time to heal? Because healing truly takes time, not just chronological time, but internal time, soul time, body time, unconscious time. Some wounds don't open all at once.
They unfold in layers. Some memories don't surface until we have enough strength to truly hold them. There are parts of us that only show themselves when they know we won't reject them anymore. Forcing this process doesn't help. It only creates more disconnection, more guilt, more self-demand. True healing respects the rhythm of what's deep inside. It doesn't rush. It doesn't pressure. It doesn't desperately try to close chapters. It knows that what matters isn't arriving quickly. What matters is arriving whole. And in that sacred time, you begin to learn something no book can ever teach you. Patience with your own process. Not a lukewarm patience, not resignation, but a loving patience, a compassionate, firm patience, the kind that says, I am here with you, even if there is no clarity yet, even if it still hurts, even if I don't understand everything, I will stay. That patience transforms everything, because often what the wound needed most wasn't a solution. It needed company. It didn't need urgency. It needed pause. It didn't need speed. It needed acceptance. And when you finally understand that, you realize there is nothing left to cure in order to be well. There is something you start to embrace, something that keeps you closer to yourself. And then, time is no longer your enemy. It becomes your teacher. It becomes your ally. It teaches you to breathe slower, to listen deeper, to walk without rushing yourself, to look at the world with a little more tenderness. And that's where the real healing truly begins. Now, there is a place in this healing process that doesn't have a clear name. It's not the beginning, and it's certainly not the finish line. It's not a crisis, but it's not a celebration either. It is that moment between two states, between two versions of you, between who you are no longer and who you haven't quite become yet. It is a quiet territory, sometimes confusing, a space where there are no clear answers, but you feel an internal movement that you simply cannot deny. It's like something inside you knows that change is happening, even if you can't quite explain it. This place is sacred, because it is right here that true transformation begins, not in grand gestures, not in visible decisions, but in that deep, fertile silence. This is where you begin to reorganize, where what once hurt like a terrible fire now burns softly like a seed, where what once felt like total confusion now feels like softening earth, a ground that, for the very first time, can truly hold something new. But standing on this threshold is not easy, because from the outside it looks like nothing is happening at all. You still have no certainty. You still cannot put words to what you feel. There are days when you doubt if you're actually moving forward, or just walking in circles. And that's when the temptation appears, the urge to go back to the known, back to the comfortable, back even to the pain, because at least that pain felt familiar. The new path hasn't revealed itself yet. It has no shape. It offers no guarantees. But if you manage to stay there, if you choose not to run away from that in-between, from that blank space, that fertile void, then something deep begins to take root. Because on that threshold, your soul is rewriting its language. It is letting go of invisible pacts. It is dismantling old structures. It is choosing what to keep and what to release forever. And that work, even though it seems invisible, is a revolution. It is in that quiet space that you realize you don't react like you used to, that you no longer repeat certain dynamics. There are things you tolerated before, but now they simply don't fit anymore. There are relationships you maintained out of habit, and now they just feel too heavy. Your body no longer tolerates the places where you betrayed yourself. Not because you are completely healed, but because you are different. You are more conscious, more present, more connected to what you want and what you absolutely do not. And so, even though you still don't know where you are going, you know where you do not want to stay. And that, right there, is already a beginning. It is the threshold. It is the path. Because healing often doesn't feel like a huge leap. It feels like taking a deeper breath, like making a more honest choice, like setting a limit right on time, like saying a no you couldn't pronounce before, or saying a yes that comes from your chest and not from fear. And every single one of those gestures, however small, is a seed, a sign, a symbol that something new is slowly being born inside you, quietly, taking root. And it is right there, in that in-between, where you need faith the most. Not religious faith, but faith as trust in the process, as surrender, as the silent certainty that what you cannot see yet is already happening within you. And it truly is. There are moments on the path to healing that hurt even more than the beginning itself. Moments when you thought you had moved forward, that you had closed a chapter, that you had conquered a fear. And suddenly, without warning, everything returns. The sadness comes back. The anxiety surfaces. The anger explodes. The wound you thought was healed opens again. And in that instant, everything shakes. You start to question whether you're truly healing, or if it was just an illusion. Did you lie to yourself about feeling better? Guilt sets in. The demanding voice tells you that you failed, that you are back where you started, that you learned nothing. But the urgent truth you need to know is this: a relapse is not a failure. It is part of the process. It is the echo of a story that is still being integrated. It is a deeper layer that has just emerged. It is a part of you that trusts you enough to show itself now, because you are finally strong enough to hold it. You are not going backward. You are simply going deeper. Healing isn't about climbing a mountain. It's about diving deep. And sometimes, the deeper you go, the more darkness you find. It's not because you are worse off. It's simply because you finally have enough light to see what was hidden before. The wound didn't return. It just showed you another part of itself. Another shade of pain, another memory, another unmet need. And this surfacing, even though it hurts, is actually an act of trust from your soul to you. But of course it hurts. It hurts to think that all that effort was for nothing, that you're still tripping over the same thing, that sadness still holds power over you. Yet there is one truth that changes everything. This time, you are not running away. This time, you know you can stay. This time, even if everything else is shaking, you are not abandoning yourself. And that simple gesture, staying with yourself, even during a relapse, is one of the most revolutionary acts of self-love. Because it breaks the cycle of self-abandonment. It teaches you that you don't need to be okay all the time to be worthy of yourself. A relapse isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign that you are truly feeling, that you are honoring what still hurts, that you are not numbing your path. And that, in itself, is bravery. Learn to look at those dark days with gentleness. Ask yourself, what part of me is speaking now? What does this feeling need so it doesn't feel so alone? How can I hold myself instead of demanding something of myself? Because sometimes, holding yourself isn't about moving forward. It's simply about not falling any deeper. And that, my friend, is already healing. Remember, healing isn't about never falling. It's about knowing how to fall with more presence, with more truth, and with less self-punishment. And every time you do that, you are moving closer to yourself. There is one part of the healing process that very few people truly understand, yet it is the part that softens the wound the most. Tenderness. Not that superficial tenderness that hides behind cliches and empty smiles. I mean a real, deep, embodied tenderness. The kind that is born when you look at yourself with the same eyes you would use to look at an injured child, or the way you would gently touch someone you love who is breaking, or how you would approach a frightened animal trembling in a corner. That tenderness is medicine, and almost no one taught us how to offer it to ourselves. We grew up learning to demand things of ourselves, to push ourselves, to correct ourselves, to hide what hurt, just so we could keep functioning. They taught us to be strong, but not to be soft, to resist, but not to take care of ourselves. So then, when we start to heal, we often do it from that exact same place, the place of relentless effort, the need for control, the expectation that we must do it well, do it quickly, and prove that it no longer hurts. But healing like that, through force, is also a form of violence. Because the wound doesn't need you to push it, it needs you to hold it, to speak softly to it, to tell it, "I'm not in a hurry, I am with you." Even if you cry today, even if you can't manage today, even if all you want is to sleep, hide, or just be silent, I won't demand anything from you. I will simply stay. And that way of being with yourself, without judgment, without an agenda, without pressure, begins to do something that no external method ever could. We need to restore that trust within you, because there is a part of you that has been standing guard your whole life, a part always expecting the next blow, the next critique, the next rejection. But when you start treating that inner part differently, from the inside, it finally begins to relax. It starts to trust. It shows itself and whispers, "Maybe this time, it's finally safe to be me." Tenderness is the greatest healer, not because it erases the pain, but because it holds it. It listens to it. It looks at it without fear. It wraps your pain in a presence that doesn't judge you, doesn't correct you, and doesn't panic. When you learn how to treat yourself like this, everything changes. Relapses are lived with less guilt. Crying no longer feels like a defeat. Vulnerability stops being shameful. Exhaustion isn't interpreted as weakness anymore. Why? Because you're no longer demanding that your healing be perfect. You are simply allowing it to be human. And that is healing. Maybe no one ever told you this before, but tonight, I want you to hear it deep in your soul. You don't need to do everything perfectly to deserve love. You don't need to be better to be worthy of your own self. You don't need to prove anything. You only need to stay with yourself, with tenderness, with presence, with that gentle patience that tells your wound, "You can breathe now. You are not alone anymore." And right there, that is where the true rebirth begins. We often imagine healing as a moment of revelation, an instant where everything changes, as if one understanding, one phrase, or one intense experience were enough to fix our entire lives. But the truth is something else entirely. It's less spectacular, but much deeper. Healing is choosing differently, again and again. Sometimes in the smallest things, it's not that you wake up one day completely at peace, it's that you begin to choose not to stay in places where your spirit dims. It's that you start saying no when fear used to make you say yes. It's that you learn to give yourself breaks when before, all you knew was how to push yourself. You stop justifying the unjustifiable. You stop sacrificing yourself just to belong. You start taking care of yourself without needing permission. And this, even if it seems minimal, is a revolution. Because every choice made from your true center, even the silent ones, rearranges your internal world. Every time you choose truthfully, you are building a new relationship with yourself. You're telling yourself, "I am worthy enough to respect myself." You are affirming your existence with love. You are stopping living out of obligation and beginning to live with true integrity. And no, it's not easy. These small choices often make others uncomfortable. They cause conflicts. They bring change. You might lose connections that no longer resonate. You might disappoint expectations you always carried as your own. You might feel lonely for certain stretches. But what you gain is immeasurable. You gain dignity. You gain self-respect. You gain peace in your chest. You gain authenticity. And above all, you gain a new kind of trust. Not trust in the future, not in external things, but trust in yourself. In your ability to choose from your soul, even when the whole world around you is shaking. This is what nobody ever tells you. True transformation isn't loud. It doesn't happen from a distance. It doesn't earn applause. But you feel it. You feel it in your body, in your breath, in the way you speak to yourself, and in how you hold yourself up through the dark days. Every time you choose differently, even just a little bit, you are coming back home to yourself. And that slow, intimate, deep return, that is the most powerful journey of all. Healing isn't just an internal process, though. It's inevitably a movement that changes how we connect with others. When you begin returning to yourself, you start seeing the bonds you've built differently. Many of them just won't fit anymore. You once sustained those relationships from a place of need, of scarcity, of deep wounding. They were connections where your role was always to give, to keep quiet to avoid conflict, to adapt so you wouldn't be rejected, or to wear a mask just to earn love. And you did this not because you weren't worthy, but because somewhere along the way you learned that being you wasn't enough. And so, as you start to heal, those old agreements break. Not immediately, and certainly not without pain. But something inside you starts whispering, "This no longer protects me. This no longer represents me. This doesn't allow me to breathe truly." And that hurts. It hurts realizing that some people don't actually know you. They love a version you created just to keep them. It hurts seeing that certain bonds only hold if you keep betraying yourself, that some relationships see your growth as a threat. But what hurts more is continuing to deny yourself just to keep them intact. That's why, on the path of healing, a natural cleansing often occurs. It's not because you think you're better or because you judge the other person. It's simply because you choose to honor your truth, even if that means goodbyes, even if it leaves you a little more alone for a while, even if it breaks dynamics you've been repeating for years. And this taps into a core wound we all carry, the fear of loneliness, the fear of being rejected, of losing your tribe, your place. But deep healing teaches you that it is better to be alone than to be badly accompanied by yourself. You choose the quiet coherence within you over the noise of a relationship that demands you pretend. And paradoxically, when you make that internal shift, when you truly choose yourself, the universe seems to rearrange itself. New people appear. New ways of loving become possible. They emerge not from need, but from authenticity, from respect, from truth. Relationships aren't truly lost. They transform. Some end, others are reborn. But they all show you something about who you are being with yourself. Because the person who connects from a place of wounding will repeat those wounds. But the person who connects from a place of healing starts to create bonds that nourish, that sustain, that heal. We also live in a very loud world. A world that celebrates words, that rewards speed, that applauds those who have quick answers, solid arguments, and sharp speeches. But the soul doesn't speak like that. The soul doesn't shout. It doesn't argue or reason. The soul only whispers, and often it can only be heard in the silence. But silence makes us uncomfortable, because in the silence, everything you were trying to avoid feeling appears. Everything you were denying is finally shown to you. Everything you distract yourself with, the activities, the screens, the endless conversations, it all sits down right next to you now. And yes, that can be scary. It might feel like loneliness. It might feel like emptiness. But it's not. Silence is not absence. It is a deep, profound presence. It is fertile ground. It is the cradle where you truly meet yourself. Because only in the silence can you begin to tell the difference between the voice of fear and the gentle voice of your own truth, between the clamor of duty and the soft melody of your deepest desires. It is in this silence where you start noticing what your body has been telling you for a long time, what your heart has kept quiet for years, what your soul whispers to you in your dreams, or in those tears that come without explanation. That feeling of, this isn't right for me. A feeling you never knew where it came from. And yes, simply sitting in silence might be one of the most courageous acts on your entire journey. Because there, without distraction, without excuses, without witnesses, you don't meet the version you show the world. You meet the part of you that has been waiting for you all along. The part that needs no explanation. The part that seeks no approval. It just wants to be seen, felt, honored. Silence is the medicine that can't be bought. It's the door no one else can open for you. It is the space where healing happens, not because you do something, but because you finally stop doing, so you can begin to be. And the more you get used to this silence, the more you learn how to listen to yourself. Not to search for quick answers, but to hold the question with respect, to stay in the mystery without needing to control it, to allow the inner truth to reveal itself in its own time, like a flower that doesn't bloom because someone rushes it, but because the sun and the water were patient. In these noisy times, choosing silence is an act of radical love, and in that love, your soul begins to speak. Since childhood, many of us were told that being sensitive was a problem. We were told we had to toughen up, that we shouldn't cry over small things, that we had to be strong, brave, rational, that feeling too much was a defect, a burden, a dangerous vulnerability. And so we learned to disconnect from the most sacred thing we possessed, our capacity to feel. But sensitivity is not weakness. It is language. It is an antenna. It is your compass. It is the way your soul perceives what cannot be seen, what isn't spoken, what can't be explained. But you know it in your body, in your emotions, in that subtle vibration that goes unnoticed by the eyes of the world. Sensitivity does not make you fragile, it makes you deep. But when you disconnect from it, just to fit in, just to survive, just to avoid bothering anyone, something inside you begins to shut down, to harden, to close itself off. And this closing, while it seems like protection, is also an exile, a moving away from your true self. And one day, you realize you don't get excited the way you used to. Your tears have dried up. Your chest has become a silent territory. You don't know what you feel anymore. You respond with logic, but something is missing, something essential, something vital. That something is your sensitivity. And on the path to healing, one of the most important and delicate movements is reclaiming that sensitivity. Not so you suffer more, not so you become more vulnerable to the world's pain, but to reconnect with what makes you human, with what lets you enjoy a song until you weep, with what makes you tremble from a simple embrace, with what moves you for no reason at all, just because it vibrates, because it touches you. Sensitivity is the soul in its purest state. And yes, feeling again hurts, because everything you anesthetized for years comes rushing back. Everything you pushed down begins to rise. Everything you denied yourself peeks out. But if you have the courage to stay there, if you allow that sensitivity to reclaim its place, then life changes. It becomes truer, more honest, more intimate. And so do you. Because you no longer need to act, or pretend, or be invulnerable. You can just be you, with your tears, with your joy, with your tenderness, with your spontaneous laughter, with your skin that feels, with your heart that trembles but keeps beating. Sensitivity is not something to be controlled. It is something to be honored. And when you do that, when you inhabit it shamelessly, you become a living channel of authenticity. And that is also healing. There is a part of you that is still waiting to be seen, heard, protected, and held. It's the part that never fully grew up, not because it couldn't, but because no one was there to sit with its pain. That part is your inner child. And even if you have forgotten him, he never left. He stayed right there, in a corner of your soul, holding on to the memories no one wanted to see. The tears that found nowhere to fall. The cries that weren't heard. The glances that never arrived in time. He stayed there, trembling, but always waiting. Waiting for one day when you, the adult you are today, would come back for him. And on the journey of healing, that moment arrives. Not as a finish line, but as a deep revelation. Suddenly, something inside you recognizes that the emptiness you feel isn't new. That fear wasn't born recently. That nameless sadness has a history. And that history began when you were still too small to understand, but not too small to feel. Childhood doesn't end when you grow up. It ends when it is seen,
when it is honored, when it is listened to with the heart you have today, not with the harshness you were forced to survive. And yes, when you open that door, everything returns. The feeling of helplessness comes back. The deep need to be loved unconditionally comes back. The scenes you couldn't name, but which were etched into your body, they come back. The echo of hard words, of impossible demands, of cold silences. But something else returns too. Tenderness returns. The chance to hold yourself as you were never held returns. The freedom to cry for everything you repressed before returns. This is your moment to tell that child, you are not alone anymore. I am here now, and I will not leave you. This meeting changes everything, because as long as that part of you waits alone, it will continue to sabotage your relationships, your choices, your boundaries, your dreams. Not out of malice, not out of stubbornness, but out of pure pain. But when you embrace it, when you include it, when you give it real space in your life, then something true begins to heal. And no, this isn't about becoming the perfect parent for yourself. It's about showing up, about staying, about holding that space without rush. It's about creating a quiet place inside you where that child can finally breathe, play, cry, laugh, and just feel. And when you do this, everything in your adult world changes, because you no longer need to search outside for the love that was missing. You no longer ask others to repair what you yourself can begin to care for. You no longer run from the pain, you embrace it. You no longer react from the wound, you choose awareness. Childhood isn't overcome, it is reconciled, it is honored, it is integrated. And that gesture is one of the deepest acts of healing you will ever live. Long before you could put words to what you felt, your body was already living it. It was already recording it. It was already holding it. Because the body is the soul's first home, and it is also the first to be wounded when life hurts. Your back remembers all the times you had to carry what wasn't yours. Your shoulders carry the tension of always holding things up. Your chest holds the silences you swallowed. Your stomach, the fear that had nowhere to go. Your skin remembers the times you desperately needed a hug, and it never arrived. But no one ever told you that. They taught you to rationalize, to understand, to explain, but not to feel with the body, not to ask it, "What are you trying to tell me?" Not to listen when it shouts with symptoms what the soul has been whispering for years. And so, real healing also passes through this, by returning to the body, by giving it back its place of wisdom. Stop treating it like an enemy or a machine. Start inhabiting it as what it truly is, the temple where your entire story lives. It's not just about doing yoga or meditating or breathing exercises. It's really about presence. It's about loving attention, an embodied kind of sensitivity. It's about learning to hear physical pain, not as a punishment, but as a message. Seeing fatigue, not as laziness, but as a sign of emotional exhaustion. Feeling insomnia, not just as a disorder, but as an internal alarm that is simply asking for your attention. Yes, at first this can feel uncomfortable. Our body holds memory, and when you finally pay attention to it, that memory activates. You might feel sadness for no clear reason. You might even cry during a massage. You might feel fear when you simply try to be still, because when you enter your body, you enter the truth. But if you stay, if you learn to inhabit that space with love, then the body becomes a refuge. It turns into your compass. It becomes a silent ally, guiding you, alerting you, walking beside you. Your body doesn't need to be perfect to be worthy. It doesn't need to meet any standards to deserve your tenderness. It only needs to be heard. And when you do that, when you finally give it a voice, it also begins to heal. Because healing isn't just mental, it's somatic, it's tactile, it's energetic, it's movement, it's trembling, it's rest. It's allowing yourself to feel from the inside, without fear. There is a part of your healing that only activates when you allow yourself to return to your body with compassion. And that's where a different kind of encounter begins, one that is more real, deeper, more complete. Sometimes we believe that healing means moving in a straight line, as if inner growth were measured in steady steps forward. No stumbles, no setbacks, no doubts. But the soul doesn't move that way. The soul isn't a train rushing forward. It is a spiral, turning. And in that spiral, going backward isn't always a mistake. Sometimes it is depth. Sometimes it's a second glance, from a completely different place. Sometimes it's the only way to finally understand what you couldn't hold before. Healing is like that. It's a coming and going, a remembering and forgetting, a falling and rising, differently. You will have days of light, where everything seems to align, and others of deep shadow, where everything feels scattered. Days of inexplicable peace, and others where the old pain returns, as if it had never left. But you are not failing. You are simply honoring the cycles. Because healing isn't an event, it's a living together. It's an alliance with your internal processes. It's the humility to accept that some things only reveal themselves in their own time, that some wounds need more than one visit, that there are layers that only open up when you stop punishing yourself for feeling them. This requires a deep maturity, the ability not to despair when it seems like you are returning to the same place. Because you are not in the same place. You are simply on the same topic, but from a different level, with new awareness, with a new body, and with a different heart. Just like nature doesn't bloom all year, you also can't always be wide open, expanding. There are winters of the soul, seasons of retreat, moments of fertile silence where nothing seems to be happening on the surface, but inside, everything is quietly rearranging itself. And if you can simply stay there, if you can breathe inside each of those seasons without rushing, without demanding, without comparing yourself, that is when you begin to discover the real rhythm of your soul. A rhythm that isn't sped up by pressure, that isn't forced by methods. It doesn't answer to external calendars. It simply reveals itself. And right there, right in that space, you begin to trust, not in a specific result, but in the process itself, in your rhythm, in your twists and turns, in your unique way of finally blooming. Because healing isn't about reaching some specific destination. It's about truly inhabiting every single cycle with honesty. And in that dance, life begins to breathe you back in. We were taught to resist, to fight, to stay strong at all costs. We were taught to even fight our own emotions, as if feeling sadness or fear or emptiness were a sign of weakness. But there is a moment on the path of healing when something deep inside just gives up. Not because you lost the battle, but because it simply no longer makes sense to fight against yourself. That surrender, far from being resignation,
is actually a doorway. It's an intimate entry point to a dimension of you that never, ever reveals itself under pressure. It's the instant you stop demanding yourself to be someone else. You stop pretending that you are fine. You stop forcing a relief that simply won't come. And finally, you sit down. You let yourself fall. You let yourself simply feel. And in that fall, something different is born. A quiet calm that doesn't come from having answers, but from giving up the desperate search for them. A rest that doesn't come from an external solution,
but from the internal permission to simply be with yourself, even in the confusion. A love that isn't conquest, but acceptance. A love that doesn't say, "I will fix you," but instead whispers, "I will stay." Surrendering is not failure. It is coming home. It's telling your body, you don't need to stay tense anymore. It's telling your heart, it's okay if you beat with fear. It's telling your soul, forgive me for demanding so much, for running so fast, for not staying with you sooner. And yes, when you surrender, you might cry. You might tremble. You might feel a dense silence that feels completely empty. But if you stay there, if you don't run, you will see that this void isn't dead. It is germinating a new way of being with yourself. A softer way, a more honest way. A way that is free of expectations, more willing to embrace you without conditions. Because healing doesn't arrive when you finally manage to control everything you feel. It arrives when you no longer need to control it at all. When you can be broken and still be worthy of love. When you can be exhausted and still deserve care. When you can know nothing at all and still feel that you belong. Surrender is not the end. It is the very first step toward true meeting. In the middle of the pain, many people look for answers in the spiritual realm. And that is okay, because there is something in the wound that cries out for meaning, something in the darkness that longs for a light. But what almost no one tells you is that true spirituality isn't a path of escape, it is a path of return. A return to you, to your deepest truth, to your soul before the fear set in, to your essence before the persona was built. It's not about repeating mantras without truly inhabiting those words. It's not about reading beautiful phrases that just decorate your life, but don't actually transform it. It is about embodying. It is about coming home. It is about living every single emotion as a bridge to something greater. And that bigger something isn't outside of you. It's already right inside you. It lives in the way you breathe when you simply choose to stay with yourself. It's in the way you look at another person, not needing to win, but just needing to understand them. It's in how you touch your own wound without demanding it heal right now. It's in the way you love, even when there are no guarantees. Spirituality isn't about being perfect. It's not permanent enlightenment. It's not the complete absence of shadow. Instead, it is radical inclusion. It is courage. It is true humility. It's about surrendering to this messy human experience with a heart that remembers there is something more. Not something superior that judges you, but something deep that just embraces you. That something can have 1,000 names or none at all. It could be God, the whole, life, the mystery, love. It really doesn't matter what you call it. What matters is how you live it. Do you use it to punish yourself for not being evolved enough? Or do you use it to hold yourself even when you are stumbling? True spirituality doesn't erase your humanity. It honors it. It sustains it. It gives it dignity. It transforms it. It teaches you to see beauty where before you could only see mistakes. It teaches you to trust when everything feels uncertain. It teaches you to breathe right inside the chaos without losing your center. Not because you suddenly have all the answers, but because you finally stop demanding them from yourself. And right there, just in that quiet moment, your soul begins to feel accompanied. Because you're no longer just alone with yourself, you are with something more. Something that doesn't need proof, something that can't be explained, but it is felt. It wraps around you.
It reminds you that even in the middle of deep sorrow, you are still sacred. That too is healing. That too is returning home. One of the biggest deceptions we were taught was believing that the past no longer matters, that what happened, happened, that we must leave it behind, bury it, forget it. But the soul does not forget. The soul holds on to everything that wasn't felt, everything that wasn't fully understood, everything that was rushed past. And until you go back there, not to stay, but just to look with truth, your present will continue to drag along those unresolved stories. You simply cannot build a future from a root that is still bleeding. But there is a different way to look at the past. Not with judgment, not with pity, and not with victimhood. Look at it with mature love. Look at it through the eyes of someone who no longer needs things to have been different just so they can start healing today. And that changes everything. It changes everything because you stop looking for culprits and you start looking for meaning. You stop wanting to change what you lived through and you start tending to what that experience actually revealed to you. You stop saying, "Why did this happen to me?" And you start asking, "What can I do now with what happened?" This isn't about justifying the unjustifiable. It's simply about letting go of the weight that is no longer yours to carry. Because often, it wasn't the event itself that hurt the most, but the abandonment you were left with afterward. The loneliness of having no one to speak to, the silence that built a wall around you, not having the tools, the voice, or the embrace you needed. And now, since you can finally offer yourself all of those things, something shifts. You can go back to that scene, not as a victim, but as a compassionate witness. You can return to that recollection, not to relive the pain, but simply to keep it company. You can look at that past self of yours with tenderness, yes, and whisper to them, "No one knew how to care for you the way you deserved, but now I am here." That single gesture, just that simple action, is capable of opening a new timeline. A timeline where your story doesn't define you as a wound, but as a kind of alchemy. Because anyone who dares to look at the past with love finds true freedom. And that freedom doesn't erase what you lived through. It honors it. It transforms it. It returns it to your heart as experience, not as a life sentence. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to do now with what happened to you. And if you choose to do it from a place of love, from truth, from compassion, then the past stops hurting the way it did before. It begins to be your quiet teacher. There are moments when you feel like everything has collapsed, when nothing makes sense, when you don't know where to go next. And something inside you whispers, almost without strength, "I have to start over." But that phrase, heavy with exhaustion, also carries an invisible seed inside it, the seed of rebirth. Because starting over isn't failure, it is choosing yourself. It means looking at the pieces and deciding with love that you are not going to rebuild yourself the same way. This time, you won't stand up just to fit in. You will stand up just to be. Starting over is not denying everything. It is honoring what you lived, recognizing what you learned, and still saying, "This no longer holds me up. I need a different way to be in the world." And yes, it is hard. It is hard because it means letting go of old certainties. It means going through loss. It means disappointing expectations that no longer resonate with who you are now. Starting over means accepting that there were paths that served their function, but today they simply don't anymore. And it's not because you failed. It's because you changed. And that, in itself, is evolution. But nobody tells you that before the new beginning, there is a symbolic death, a pause, an abyss, a time when everything feels unstable, confusing, even lonely. Because when you decide not to continue the way you did before, but you still don't know how to continue now, the void appears. And that void is not a punishment. It is a womb. It is the fertile space where your new truth begins to take shape. And in that silence, you start noticing things you ignored before. Which relationships feel heavy? Which places dim your light? Which habits pull you away from yourself? And with every awareness, a new choice is born. Not forced, not rushed. It is simply chosen. Because starting over is not about having all the answers. It is about daring to live new questions. It is about allowing something quiet and different to finally guide you. It is not fear. It's not obligation. It's not duty. It is the sincerity of a self that can no longer deny its truth. And from that deep honesty, every small step becomes a sacred act. You don't have to make it perfect. You only have to make it real. And that, in itself, is healing. Starting over isn't going back to the beginning. It's simply returning to yourself, but with brand new eyes. There is one kind of loneliness that hurts, that burns in your chest like a deep absence, that seeps into your days like an echo of something missing. But there is another kind of solitude, more subtle, deeper, and truly fertile. This solitude is not a punishment. It is a doorway. It is the solitude you choose when you decide you will no longer betray yourself, when you leave relationships you no longer fit into, when you let go of roles that have taken you away from your own soul, when you choose silence over the noise that drowns you out. That solitude, it's not abandonment, it is reverence. And yes, at first it might feel like a huge loss. For so long you believed that being accompanied meant being whole, that having someone near was proof of your worth, that sharing your path with another was the only way to not feel lost. But life, in its deep wisdom, sometimes leaves you alone, just so you can find yourself, so you can discover that you can hold yourself up, that you can be your own shelter, that you can simply exist in your afternoons without needing an anesthetic, that you can look in the mirror without running away, that you can cry in your room and still be with yourself. You can sit with your soul and not immediately rush out, because right there, exactly there, something begins to change. You no longer define yourself by who is or isn't there. You no longer rely on external validation. You stop searching outside for what you can begin to offer yourself within. And that's when solitude transforms. It's no longer absence, it is space. It's no longer a burden, it is rest. It's no longer a hollow void, it is a nest. A nest where you can finally conceive yourself anew, where your thoughts have room to breathe, where your emotions don't need to be hidden, where you can read your own story calmly, where you can sleep without owing anyone anything, where you can simply be without permission. This solitude is a gift. It is the prelude to re-encounter, because only the one who learns to be their own companion can choose companionship from a place of freedom, not lack. And only the one who loves themselves in the quiet stillness can truly love in connection. You are not alone in your solitude. You are with you. And that is the beginning of everything new. For a long time, maybe you thought setting boundaries was selfish, that saying no might cause harm, that protecting your space was the same as rejecting someone else. But over time, something begins to shift. You finally understand that boundaries are not a punishment. They are self-care. They are the silent language with which you tell the world, I am learning how to take care of me. And this, too, is love. Because when you are healing, you are vulnerable, you are sensitive, you are reordering all your internal pieces. You need space, time, and true presence. You need relationships that don't demand what you cannot give, conversations that don't force you to lie, encounters where you can simply be yourself, even if that means silence. That is not weakness, it is emotional wisdom. It is understanding that healing means reviewing your attachments, recognizing which ones nourish you and which ones drain you, distinguishing between those who look at you with tenderness and those who only seek you out when you need to be strong. It's about looking clearly at where you lose yourself, where you deny yourself, where you let yourself fade out. And with that deep awareness, you say, enough. Enough with pleasing others just to avoid rejection. Enough with carrying guilt that isn't yours. Enough with allowing disrespect in the name of affection. Enough with giving when you are already empty. Enough of staying quiet just to avoid bothering people. Enough of being somewhere you no longer truly are. Because everything you don't speak, your body holds it. And every limit you fail to set on the outside becomes an excess on the inside. So you begin to learn that loving someone also means knowing when to step back, that caring also means knowing how to close doors, that companionship isn't always about staying, sometimes it's about letting go. Setting a clear boundary doesn't destroy true connections, it cleanses them, it makes them honest, and you become more you, without needing to fake strength, without needing to justify your existence, without needing to explain so much. Because your limit, when it truly comes from love, defines. It doesn't exclude. It protects. It doesn't separate. It teaches. And the first person who needs to learn this is you. Stop hurting yourself in the name of affection. Stop betraying your own healing out of fear of disappointing others. Start creating relationships where you can actually rest instead of just resisting. True boundaries aren't walls. They are bridges between your truth and your freedom. There are days when everything feels shaky, when your inner world is trembling, when nothing seems to have a solid base. And right there, where fear shows up strongest, you ask yourself, how do I trust? The answer isn't a promise. It isn't external certainty. It isn't a guarantee. It's another question. Can you stay with yourself even when you don't know what's coming? Because that is real trust. Not the kind that expects everything to turn out well. It's the kind that stays, even when everything seems to be falling apart. It's not dependent on results. It's born from the deepest connection you can build, the connection with yourself. And this connection doesn't happen suddenly. It is cultivated. It's cultivated when you choose not to run from what you feel, when you choose not to judge your own process, when you choose to breathe even when your inner world is shaking, when you choose to place your hand on your chest and whisper, I am here. I will not leave. Trust isn't knowing you won't fall. It's knowing that if you fall, you won't abandon yourself. And that changes everything. You begin to move from a different place, not from the urgency of avoiding pain, but from the stillness of knowing you can hold it. Not from the desire to control, but from the peace of knowing you are building a shelter inside yourself. Slowly, your body begins to feel it. You breathe deeper. You speak to yourself with more softness. You make decisions you used to avoid. And without realizing it, you trust. Not because the world changed, but because you are different. Because you no longer leave yourself behind. This kind of trust doesn't scream, it doesn't demand, it doesn't run. It's like a quiet whisper beside you, telling you in the middle of the chaos, keep going. You are doing the best you can. You are returning to yourself, and that is enough. Trusting isn't having the map. It's walking with an open heart. There is a point on the healing journey where something inside settles down. Not because the pain is gone, not because everything is solved, but because something in you has become more present, more real, more uniquely yours. And that point is called integration. Integration isn't overcoming everything, it's dwelling within it. It's being able to look back and see not just wounds, but footprints. Not just falls, but deep learning. Not just chaos, but parts of yourself that you now recognize as truly yours. There is no longer a battle with what happened. There is respect. There is no longer a rejection of emotions. There is space. There is no longer a need for perfection. There is simply humanity. And that is freedom. Because you can feel sadness without feeling weak. You can feel fear without hiding anymore. You can feel rage without blaming yourself for it. You can finally embrace your shadow without letting it define who you are. You can keep healing without demanding that life be perfectly calm all the time. Because you realize that healing isn't about stopping feeling things, it's about stopping the running. And that's when life starts to take on a new color. Not because it gets easier, but because you stop betraying yourself. You don't forget yourself. You don't abandon yourself so quickly anymore. You have learned how to stay, how to hold yourself up, how to listen, how to forgive yourself, how to rewrite your own story. Every step you take now carries your own voice, your story, your truth. You're no longer repeating scripts that belong to others. You aren't acting just to fit in. You are not silencing the places where you used to scream inside. Because now you live with deeper roots. These roots, they hold you when everything else is shaking. They remind you who you are when doubt creeps in. They connect you to others authentically, not through a mask. They let you live in the present moment, even with your scars. Integration is simply becoming home again. A home big enough for all your parts. A home where the light doesn't exclude the shadow, where the pain doesn't deny the joy, where the incomplete parts are also beautiful, where uncertainty still makes sense. And when you arrive at this place, you don't need so many answers anymore, because what truly matters is already within you. Now, reaching this point, you might think healing has a finish line, a place where everything lines up perfectly, where the soul is free forever, where there is no more shadow, no fear, no void. But if you have felt this journey deeply, you know that isn't true. Healing is not a destination, it is a way. It is the way you choose to be with yourself every single day. The way you breathe in the middle of the chaos, the way you listen to your body when something breaks, the way you speak softly to yourself when you fall again, the way you hold yourself up without demanding explanations. It is an intimate, daily, invisible commitment, not to perfection, but to presence. Because from now on, it's not about not feeling pain. It's about never abandoning yourself when the pain arrives. It's not about being strong. It's about being honest. It's not about doing everything right. It's about being true to what vibrates inside you. True to your truth, even if it shakes. True to your heart, even if it bleeds. True to your soul, even if it doesn't know the exact path yet. And if there is one thing you can carry with you from this moment, let it be this. You are not broken. You are simply returning. Returning to yourself, to your center, to your humanity, to your love. Not that conditional, fearful, dependent love, but the kind of love that cares, that sustains, that nourishes, the love that begins with you, the love that is not rushed, that does not need approval, the love that stays. Because now, you stay. You know how to remain, and from that staying, life truly changes. Your relationships become more real. Your decisions feel more aligned. Your body feels lighter. And even when sadness returns, even when fear visits you, even when doubt knocks at the door, you are not the same person anymore. You don't leave yourself alone. You don't silence yourself inside. You live now, not to appear, but to feel. And that is quiet, slow, deep, sacred healing. The healing we need is not shouted out loud. It is not measured or published for others to see. It is simply lived. It is honored. It is quietly embraced, day after quiet day, found in every stumble and in every single breath we take. Thank you. Thank you for being the home your own soul has searched for. Remember this, the cure is never outside of you. The cure is already within you. It has always been there, and tonight, finally, it begins to bloom.